Eagles. Eagles.
And welcome in, everybody, to a Monday or Tuesday morning, edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, John McMullen. A little February 3rd edition for all you guys. I forgot to mention to you yesterday. It's February. We are out of January. Super Bowl month is here. Super Bowl weekend this upcoming week for the final wrap on the NFL season. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Tuesday morning, my friend?
Doing well. I saw Super Bowl Media Day. That looked like a rinky-dink affair. I don't know if you saw it. What the hell is going on there?
John, I don't think there's any buzz around this Super Bowl, man. I don't know what it is, but not a whole lot.
Well, the buzz you can talk about, but that doesn't explain why the NFL did that the way they did it after the way they have been doing it, which is, arenas, and it was in the Superdome last year. And now they just roll up a bunch of podiums in the San Jose Convention Center with no fans. It's like, what are we in COVID days? What are we doing here? But anyway, that's my first take of the day. Well, I stopped doing my pet peeves of the day. What are they doing? Anyway, but
the summer, we got to bring back the pet peeves for the offseason. I feel like the offseason pet peeves might be better than the regular season pet peeves.
Well, you usually get them, whether I
prod you or not.
whether we label it or not, you usually get them.
All right, good stuff, John. Where are we, man, on Eagle Land? I think there's still a little bit of cautious optimism about Vic Fangio, but all indications do seem that the scare is in the rearview mirror. Do you think Vic is going to return? I mean, let's just start with that today, because I do think a lot of people still have that on their mind. Is Vic coming back? Is he not? Les Bowen wrote an article. We'll have Les on today about Vic Fangio's potential retirement, which is always good to bring Les on. So we'll hear him. Is Vic Fangio coming back, John, next year?
Yes, I believe. Certainly the Eagles are operating with the belief he's coming back. So that's how I'll describe it.
Okay.
I went to Raw last night, and I happened to catch up with somebody just by chance. And, they're certainly operating. And everybody who watches that show is going to think it's Dom. It's not Dom because he was there. But they are operating with the belief that he will be back. Now, again, I've said it since he got here almost. I talk about his age. I don't want. It's not ageism related. It's just the reality of, look, he was thinking about retiring before he got here. This was his last stop. He said it. He's clearly stated he's not going anywhere else. He knows the end is near. And it's become a sort of Jason Kelsey coaching thing where, he goes year by year, and hopefully, they've talked him back to coming back. But I leave the door slightly ajar because he might, on the eve of training camp or something like, do I really want to go through this again? I don't think he'd do that, but when you get to that stage of life, things are different. You can't act like he's Sean Mannion, 33 years old. I mean, it's a grind.
Yeah, man, he's 68 or 67 years old. If he wants to kick his feet up and watch the Phillies, or do what he's got to do, make his signature meals and go to the Penrose Diner, then so be it. But
Palladium, correct, the Palladium.
There you go, the Palladium. I can't blame him, but it will be a big loss, John. And it is It is funny though, because we talk about the offensive coordinator a lot on this show, and it's not to delegitimize what Vic does, but we talk about how it's so much more players than coach on the coordinator, and that's one of your big things that you talk about, because I think you're right that
Vic talks about it as well. I'll just jump.
I agree. I'm just saying, I think the vast majority of consumers, even like fans, that when I talk to them, when I'm just out talking to anybody, they blame it all on Kevin Petullo. I don't know if it's because it's the easiest thing to do, and I know you harp on that, but Boy, losing Vic would be tough, man. I mean, losing Vic would be a tough. He's the
Well, I
architect.
do. I mean, I'm not going to compare those two. There are different levels, and that's one of my pet peeves and frustrations. Is I always say talent over. The best example would be, I think if you take the emotion out of it, Belichick or Brady. Well, they're both great. It's astonishing that both Hall of Fame, but I'll take Brady. I'd love to have them both, but if you force me to choose, I'm taking Brady. I'm a player. They can't go on the field.
Right.
To me, it shouldn't even be a conversation. And Vic would be the first person to tell you that. The first person. But that said, when you measure him against his peers, like he's way ahead. If you measure Kevin Patullo against his peers, he's just, probably just a guy. Vic's, I brought it up since he's gotten here. He's the guy. He's the defense. Like everybody hires Shanahan, McVay guys on offense. The whole league is Shanahan, McVay guys. He's that on defense. And he has been for about 12, 13 years now. It's been a long time. He's the guy on defense. So it would be a major loss, but he can't make, he can't make water into wine. I mean, if you don't have talent, you can have the best coach. And again, instead of winning 4 games, you might win 6 or 7. But you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender. You need players. I can't even believe people push back, and a lot of people push back on me with that.
No, I think you're right about that. But the question then would become, John, is, well, how much does the loss of Fangio matter? If they were a real, and obviously it matters, but I'm talking about degree here. They're a great defense, and they have a lot of great talent. Vic has, in my opinion, made them and gotten the most out of them, obviously, the last 2 seasons. How much of a drop-off would be expected there if Vic wasn't here? Now, I think he's going to return, so all is good. But just trying to measure the degree in which Vic Fangio improves that defense as the architect of the unit.
Well, they won 11 games last year, and obviously it's a complimentary game. But, if you have I'll describe it. If you have an 11-win defense, and everybody would argue they had a better than 11-win defense because most of the issues were on the other side of the ball. But for sake of argument, if you have an 11-win defense, you're probably going to win 8 or 9 without them. They're just going to go down. Question is, can you limit it? And they have enough talent where I think they could limit it. And part of the reasons, you're whenever he does leave, and I don't think it's going to be this year, as I said. If it's next year, you're lucky if you're the night that he's gotten these players, the young players, the Quinyon Mitchells, the Cooper DeJeans, etc., in a position to thrive, and he's already developed them for you. So that's a very positive situation to walk into. But to me, the complicated aspect is, how does Howie operate? Knowing, but from when I say that, because it's now more in the public's mind, he's probably always had that mindset. Like He knew from the day he got here, it wasn't a long-term thing. So it might not change at all. But Nakobe Dean is probably the best example of this. Nakobe loves, Vic loves Nakobe. And we always talk, how do you keep him? How do you keep him if you're the Eagles? Well, I don't think they can keep him. And just, understanding, well, Vic's not going to be here forever. So the next guy's not going to be in love with him. So that probably leans, Howie more in a different direction. So little things like that.
Yeah, it's a good point, though. A guy like Nakobe Dean is a great example of, if Vic is here or younger, maybe you try and keep him around because Vic likes the player, but because he's leaving, we'll change your direction potentially with it. John, what do you think What do you think the succession plan would look like? Do you think it would be in-house Clint Hurt? Do you think maybe they would try and bring somebody in to prepare him for that? Do you think they would wait till next year and look for a veteran guy, out on the market, and try and go maybe not as old as Vic, but maybe a more established veteran presence because that's worked out so well? What kind of things do you think the Eagles would look to do to replace Vic if Vic is returning this year, which it looks like he's going to? I would assume it's going to be his last year. There's no guarantee on that. I don't think he said that publicly, but I would assume that would be my expectation. What do you think the Eagles' succession plan will look like with Vic Fangio?
Well, I think you kind of got an intimation of how it would go from Jimmy's report, Jimmy Kempski's report. They wanted to talk to Jonathan Gannon, wanted to explore Jim Swartz.
Right.
And then if you look at the offensive side of the ball, well, they wanted Mike McDaniel, they wanted Brian Daboll. So I think it's very similar. It's you go for the home run, and if you don't get the home run, you try to uncover the next young ascending coach. I think that's the way they've approached it in the past and the way they'll continue to approach it. So I don't think it's about grooming somebody on the staff right now. I think it would be very similar to what happened on offense this year. Depending on, and who knows if Nick is back, but, because I think he and Jalen, the urgency has increased with them that's just the nature of the NFL. But just when it comes to coaching staff and interviews, I think that seems to be their approach. If they think they're still a Super Bowl contender, who knows? They might have a bad season. A lot of things could happen this offseason. This has been a really consistent organization, 5 consecutive playoff appearances. You know the numbers. What if they have to move on from AJ Brown? What if Lane Johnson retires? Right there. That's a Hall of Famer and a guy who's at a Hall of Fame trajectory. I mean, that you talk about succession plans. Those are the more important succession plans. Like, how do you replace that?
Yeah, right.
And you can make Howie's on quite a run of making good decisions. Certainly drafting. They took a year off from free agency, essentially. But he's on quite a run. You got to hit like right away. You got to find a right tackle and a wide receiver 1. Maybe Devontae can do it, wide receiver 2, whatever. You got to find a meaningful contributor at a very high level. And that doesn't even bring up Dallas Goedert. And if you're moving on from all these people, that means you're most likely getting it from the draft, but you can't draft every stinking position.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work.
So a lot of things to.
So the much more pressing need to you still remains the personnel and figuring out.
That will never change. Never.
I just didn't know when you have a degree, like when you reach the degree like Vic, where he is as good of a coach as he is, and he makes the difference that he makes, how much does the scale tip? So that's what I was trying to unlock. But I do follow your logic there. Just sticking on the DC, John, how much of an option do you think Clint Hurt would be? For those who don't know, Clint Hurt was a defensive coordinator before he came to Philly in Seattle with Pete Carroll. I don't know if anybody remembers that time. It wasn't great. He didn't have great defenses there. Now, a lot of people put it on Pete at the time because, Clint didn't necessarily have the Legion of Boom, but he did have he was with Pete Carroll in Seattle, and the defense just got worse under Clint Hurt for his 2 years as DC. But I remain optimistic that Clint Hurt would be a good defensive coordinator. I think he's done a good job with the defensive line from what I can tell. Do you think Clint Hurt would be an option, John?
Well, I think internally, yeah, he'd be the top option. But again, I think they already highlighted that they would have been looking outside if he did retire.
Right.
So, um, not to say they wouldn't have come back and land on him, because I don't think Gannon would have came back, especially if he had the Green Bay offer. So Jim Schwartz is under contract, so it's easy to talk about these guys, but it's not easy to get them. So if it's similar to Mike McDaniel and Brian Daboll on the defensive side, and you don't get them, well, you gotta pivot. And there's plenty of young, good ascending defensive coaches around the league. I'm sure it would have been similar to what they did on offense, and they would have talked to a bunch of them. But I do think, because of the way the offense, the difference is they can talk to guys on defense. They weren't going to consider anybody here to be elevated because of the way the offense performed. So you didn't have any in-house candidates here because of the way things went on the offensive side. That's the only difference. You would have, maybe you want to talk to Clint Hurt. Maybe you want to even talk to Bobby King. Maybe you want to talk to Joe Casper as one of those ascending young defensive minds. They could do that on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, of all those guys, the favorite would certainly be Clint Hurt, who was just the head coach at the Senior Bowl. So, he interviewed for, I think, Miami's defensive coordinator job, which, they have a defensive-minded head coach now with Jeff Hafley, but still, that'd be a step up. So, I mean, he's on the radar to begin with, and he's a former defensive coordinator as well, and before that, assistant head coach. So, he would be the clear in-house front runner, I would say.
How do you view his time in Seattle? I read a couple of things about it. It didn't seem like it went very well. It wasn't all on Clint, but it wasn't a very good defense when he was the DC.
Well, like you said, he didn't have the Legion of Boom. Same thing, man. You're rebuilding from a great defense that you had all that year, and you don't have the same level of talent. So, that's what happens. I mean, Vic's got a long history in this league. Very long, impressive history in coaching, 40 years. But, since he's been a defensive coordinator, even a very long history since he broke through, and he hasn't always had great defenses. Always been a great coach. But you got to go back to 1995 when he became a defensive coordinator.
Woo, man, that's a long time ago.
And he didn't, that whole string, he didn't have good defenses all the time. And it jockeys before. And like I said, for all his greatness, he's got one number one defense over that time frame. One. Philadelphia was lucky enough to see it. And he's got a bunch of top fives. He's got a bunch of top tens, which really tells you how good he is. But you're at the mercy of a lot of things when you're a coach. Number one is personnel. You need a certain level of personnel to perform at a very high level. And he's done it in San Francisco. He's done it in Chicago. He's done it in Denver. Did it in Miami, even though people don't realize it. And he's done it with the Eagles. Those are his last, since he really took off in San Francisco. And he's been pretty damn consistent. But, he's also he'll tell you about Patrick. If you let Vic talk, he'll tell you about Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman. He'll tell you about Khalil Mack. A lot of freaking good players helping him with those good defenses.
That's right. John, do you think this is going to be his last year?
Yeah, I do. But, if he coaches this year, which I said my understanding is he will. He'll be 68 going on 69 next year. He's going to coach till 70. I don't think so. I think this might be it.
Yep, I agree with you. I think this will be it for Vic Fangio. We will see what that means for the Philadelphia Eagles organization, who have become a very defensive football team. No complaints about that. But when you lose Vic Fangio, what does that mean for how good the team is? Hey, offense! Hey, offense! I need you to wake up, offense. That's what we're going to need, John. That's